The catastrophe of hidden insulin resistance. You can be insulin resistant for 10 years or more, and your doctor can still be telling you everything looks fine. I'll explain. Meanwhile, your blood vessels are being damaged, your brain is under attack, and your energy is being quietly stolen, one high carb meal at a time. And the problem with this hidden resistance is because by the time it finally shows up as prediabetes or diabetes, a lot of damage has already been done. It's already baked in. Everywhere I go now, I see the consequence of this. Expanding waistlines, fatigue, brain fog, aches and pains, and a level of chronic illness that we simply didn't see on this scale 40 years ago when I first started practice. And one of the most common silent drivers of all this I see behind this is hidden insulin resistance. In this video, I want to show you why your standard labs can look normal while insulin resistance is quietly damaging your body, how this drives chronic inflammation and oxidative stress. The simple tests and at-home checks you can use to catch it much earlier, and what you can do starting right now to change your trajectory. Take control. There is hope for your health, but you do have to take this seriously. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Forrest, Clinic Director of the Pain and Brain Healing Center and Chief Science Officer for the BioSpec Nutritionals. For over 4 decades, I've been helping patients with chronic pain, fatigue, brain fog, mood issues, and metabolic disorders by getting to the root causes of their illness. And I can tell you bluntly, we are not suffering from a deficiency of medication. We are suffering from a toxic combination of processed foods, sugar, refined carbs, sedentary life, unresolved stress issues, all driving this insulin resistance. Before we go any further though, a quick disclaimer. This video is educational only and not personal medical advice. Always work with your clinician, especially if you have known cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or are on medication. So, again, educational only. Now, the big thing is that insulin resistance is always hidden to begin with. You can look normal on labs and still be very insulin resistant. Insulin resistance simply means this: your cells are not listening to the insulin the way they should. Insulin is the hormone that helps move the glucose from your bloodstream into your cells, so you can actually use it for energy. When your diet is loaded with sugar and refined carbs, or day after day, year after year, your cells are constantly bathed in high insulin over time. And they respond to this by saying, okay, enough, I'm not listening anymore. They go deaf to it. In the early stages, your body tries to compensate. Your pancreas says, well, if you're not listening, I'll just shout louder. And it pumps out more insulin, and then more insulin, and then more, and to keep your blood sugar down, looking normal on paper. Now, I want to say something very important here. This is not only about junk food and sugar sodas, and everyone is genetically and physiologically unique. I personally became pre-diabetic by eating all my life since I was 18 a very whole foods, natural foods diet, what you'd call a healthy whole foods diet. Lots of homemade breads. I made the bread myself, legumes, honey, maple syrup, not fast food, not candy, just good carbs. But for my physiology, for my body, the amount of carbs I ate and was eating, even from a natural and processed source, drove my insulin and blood sugar too high, unknowing to me at that time. So please don't assume you're safe just because your carbs are whole or organic or natural. You have to check. Your metabolism still has its limits. You personally do. Everyone's different. So if you go in for a routine physical, your fasting glucose might come back at 95 or 100. Your doctor smiles and says you're fine. But they're not looking at your fasting insulin, one of the most important numbers to look at. The insulin might already be in double digits. Day after day, your body is working overtime just to hold the line against this constant surge of blood glucose. This is hidden phase, where we have tremendous opportunity to intervene before it becomes pre-diabetes or full-blown diabetes. You don't feel it as insulin resistance. You feel it as afternoon crashes and cravings and brain fog and low mood and stubborn weight gain around the middle. That just won't move or leave, and poor sleep and increasing aches and pains because of inflammation. It creeps in slowly and eventually shows up as then chronic disease. Chronic inflammation, chronic disease. Again, This is educational, not medical advice. Talk to your clinician. There is an unhappy triad. Insulin resistance rarely travels alone. When insulin resistance builds, it rarely travels alone. I call this an unhappy triad, as I say. The insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, essentially a slow rusting of your tissues from the inside out, that oxidation, that free radical damage. Every time you hit your body with a big blood sugar insulin surge from a soda, pastries, or even whole grain bread, a bowl of pasta, a steady stream of snacks, you're sending biochemicals to your body, sends stress signals to your system. And over time, that drives inflammation in your blood vessels, oxidative damage to your mitochondria, the little power plants in your cells, changes in your brain and nerve function, disruption in your immune system. Very much insulin resistance affects your immune system. This is why insulin resistance is so deeply tied to cardiometabolic risk. It isn't just about borderline blood sugars. It's about heart attacks, stroke, type 2 diabetes, all coming from metabolic syndrome. And this leads to cognitive decline, dementia, even Alzheimer's. They're calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes now. It leads to chronic pain in the beginning and fatigue in a body that simply just can't repair itself. Insulin resistance drives all this. When I look at a patient struggling with chronic symptoms, obesity, stubborn weight around the middle, I'm asking, is insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, and oxidative stress quietly fueling this fire, this problem? Too often the answer is yes, and it's been going on for years when I finally catch it. That's why testing is so vital, proper testing. So, the right testing, stop guessing. One simple missing lab is why we are missing insulin resistance for years. And the good news is we don't have to do that. We don't have to guess. We can measure this insulin level. If you want to detect insulin resistance early, here are some tests I think everyone should discuss with their clinicians. Number one, fasting glucose, of course. This is one of the most annual physicals. They already do it. It's helpful, but by itself it's not enough. Number two, fasting insulin. This is the big missing piece. It tells you how hard your body is working, your pancreas is working behind the scenes to keep that glucose in a fairly normal range. If the only reason your glucose is okay is maybe because your insulin is sky high, that is not a healthy situation. That is insulin resistance. When we combine fasting glucose and fasting insulin, we can calculate something called a HOMA-IR, HOMA-IR. That's research-based estimate of how insulin resistant your body is. Number three, always test hemoglobin A1C, not just when you're diabetic, but before. This gives you about a 3-month average of your blood sugar exposure. Prediabetes is commonly defined as an A1C between 5.7 and 6.4. But in my mind, if you're drifting upward and your lifestyle is carb heavy, that's a warning light, not a number to ignore. A1C also tells about something really important called glycation. When extra sugar sticks onto proteins, damaging delicate tissues like in your eye and the retina and the nerves in your legs, giving you neuropathy or in the kidney, nephropathy. So that's why poorly controlled diabetes is associated with blindness, neuropathy, nephropathy, kidney disease. So when I see a fasting glucose around 100 and fasting insulin up in double digits, and maybe an A1C creeping up to 5.7, 5.8, 5. I know this person is working way too hard biochemically to look normal on paper. That's the moment to get serious, not to wait and see what happens. So you want to take action at that point. And so you want to get tested so you can know where you're at. Now, why after meal spikes matter? Your blood sugar after meals may be telling a very different story than your fasting glucose. Most people are never told insulin resistance often shows up first the problems after a meal, long before fasting numbers go up. You may have a fasting glucose that looks okay, but if you take your glucose after a meal, the numbers of the postprandial glucose and insulin are spiking like crazy. That big plate of pasta and with French bread or a sandwich and chips or coffee with sugar or whatever may send your blood sugar into the stratosphere for maybe 1, 2, 3 hours, and then the insulin is spiking. Repeated spikes like that can harm your blood vessels very much. The endothelium gets harmed by that. It increases oxidative stress and fans the flame of chronic inflammation. Think of it this way. Every time your blood sugar surges too high and too often, you're hitting your tissues with a metabolic sledgehammer. And if you repeat that pattern multiple times a day, every day, for years, no medication can fully outrun the damage of that lifestyle. We have to change the inputs, what you are eating. This is where a simple at-home experiment can give you a powerful feedback. And I highly recommend you consider this. And it's very simple. You can just go to your pharmacy and get an at-home glucose meter. The at-home glucose meter experiment. One cheap device at a drugstore that can change how you eat and how you live. So again, you don't need fancy technology to start understanding your own metabolism. You can walk into almost any drugstore and buy a basic glucose meter. And that's how I have patients, and this is how I have patients use it. Eat a typical meal, your typical meal, don't eat a perfect meal. And then test. Eat like you normally would, check your blood sugar 1 to 2 hours, that 1 to 2 hour period after eating. And look for a pattern. If you're repeatedly over 140 at an hour and a half or 2 hours, your body is struggling with that load. That's too high a carbohydrate for your physiology. That doesn't replace lab tests, and it's not a formal diagnosis, but it's a loud message from your body that your current way of eating is not working. Patients always ask me, well, I want to go low carb, but can I eat potatoes? Can I eat bread? Can I have pasta, lasagna? Well, my answer is always, let's ask your body. Test your post-meal, post-prandial glucose, have a lasagna meal and check the glucose at 2 hours and see if it's shooting past 140, some say 130, some say 120, but definitely 140, you're working really hard. You're getting into metabolic issues. If it stays in the healthy range, then I guess you physiologically can handle that amount of carbs. I mean, that's where you're going to find out. These home meters have variability. They're not perfect, but they're extremely helpful for patterns and putting you back into the driver's seat. Again, this is educational only, not medical advice. Always talk to your clinician. So what can you do now? What can you do after you've done a test? It's nutrition and movement. You don't need perfection. You need direction. You don't need perfection. You need direction. So what can you do right now? First, let's talk nutrition. Again, remember, just start a good direction. Start paying attention to which foods cause the largest blood sugar spikes for you. In general, emphasize protein at each meal. Add fiber, especially from vegetable, nuts, and seeds. Include healthy fats, and that slows down absorption and helps blunt that glucose curve. Cut way back on refined carbs or maybe carbs in general, depending on your physiology. Of course, candy, sugar is out of the question. And remember, because we are all genetically and physiologically unique, sometimes even good carbs like whole grain breads, big bowls of legumes, and fruit and honey and maple syrup and natural sweeteners can really spike that glucose. It can be too much for certain. It was too much for my body. It can be too much for your body. Eaten even in moderate amounts. My own story is proof of that. So don't rely on labels like healthy, whole, natural. Let your meter and your labs tell you how much carbohydrates you physiologically can truly handle. This isn't just about dieting or chasing a number on a scale. This is about whether you show up in 10 years with a heart attack, a stroke, dementia, neuropathy, nephropathy, retinopathy, or whether you can keep your metabolic system resilient and your brain healthy so you don't get Alzheimer's and dementia. And then movement. Your muscles are one of the best glucose sinks. It just takes in that glucose. So even a 10 to 20 minute walk after a meal can help flatten that glucose curve, bring it down, and improve insulin sensitivity over time. You don't have to start with an hour at the gym, but you do have to stop living in a chair. Small, consistent movement done day after day can have a powerful cumulative effect. Okay? So talk to your clinician about this. Do more research. Check out my website. There's a lot more information out there. Another thing you can look at, targeted nutraceutical support to a better diet. Certain botanicals can help nudge your metabolism in the right direction. Alongside diet and lifestyle, there are certain nutraceuticals I have found helpful in my practice to support healthier blood sugar levels and lower inflammation. Even in my own life, I use these. And as Chief Science Officer of Biospec Nutritionals, I spent a lot of time doing research and designing formulas to do exactly that. One of the botanicals I often utilize is berberine. Human research has shown that berberine can help improve fasting blood glucose. This is on human research. And lipid markers like cholesterol, especially as an adjunct to a better diet and movement and lifestyle. There's also dihydroberberine, a form that has now been developed to improve absorption compared to plain berberine. But they both work well. For systemic inflammation and oxidative stress, I use concentrations of like curcumin and ginger and boswellia, found in a product that I created, like Inflam 95. And that product I formulated called Inflam 95 for Biospec Nutritionals. I also like my patients to know their omega-3 status. I test for this. We often talk about omega-3 index. And we aim for a healthier range. Commonly around 8 to 10% has been found in research. And I find most patients maybe down at 3 or 4%. It helps support their overall health. Of course, these are not standalone cures. You cannot out-supplement a daily assault of sugar and refined carbs and even excess healthy carbs that are simply too hard for your body to handle. They work best as part of a comprehensive plan that includes nutrition, movements, diet, sleep, and stress management. Stress can really raise your blood sugar. As always, you should work with your healthcare provider before adding new supplements, especially if you're on prescription medications for blood sugar, blood pressure, lipids. Again, this is educational only and not medical advice. Always talk to your clinician. Let's bring it all together, okay? Let's take a look at this as a whole. Don't wait for a diagnosis to start healing. So let's look at what we can do now. You can bring insulin resistance for years before standard. You can find it years before standard tests can find it. Doing and getting rid of the chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and quietly damaging your blood vessels and your tissues and your nerves. Meanwhile, the modern carb-heavy, processed foods, plus in some cases natural and very high carb diet, is pouring gasoline on that fire. We see that results all around us with obesity, fatigue, depression, pain, early disability, all tied into insulin resistance. So do the right testing, fasting glucose, fasting insulin, A1C, and a simple home post-meal check. So just check and see how you're handling your carbohydrate levels before you become pre-diabetic. So you can make changes in your life and movement and target nutraceuticals when appropriate. You can start changing the trajectory of your health right now. At the Pain and Brain Healing Center, this is exactly what we focus on: a comprehensive history, the right labs, and a personalized plan to address root causes rather than chasing symptoms and managing the disease after it's manifested. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit my website at painandbrainhealingcenter.com. And keep an eye out for my monthly newsletter where I share more tools to help you change your life. I'm Dr. Greg Forrest. Thank you for spending this time with me. Remember, you're not broken, but the modern lifestyle is. And for some of us, even a high, healthy carb lifestyle is more than our genetics and physiology can handle. So take a look at your diet. When you stop letting those patterns run your biology and start working with your body instead of against it, you can change the story. This video, again, is educational only and not personal medical advice. Always work with your clinician, especially if you have known cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or on medications. You can call our clinic at 763-862-7100, again, or go online to painandbrainhealingcenter.com. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to seeing you in another video.